Cool. There we go.
There's three of us here. The colors aren't coming?
No, Ron hurt his knee or something, or his hip or his knee. Yeah. So he's they're taking it easy tonight, and he'll be getting a shot tomorrow. So
Oh, okay.
yes. All right. So it's just us. I guess we have 3 people online. So.
Well, it's a good evening to collect stars.
Yeah, you're
Put me down for about five
your prospects have gone up.
Breezy pickings. Right now you
Ah.
only have 2, Paul, because I went into purgatory and lost
Yeah, I
them.
know.
Yeah, we could really mess with people when could have purgatory, the wall of fame, and then heaven. the, the right hand of God, and we can put Paul with a couple stars up there. Oh gosh! All right. So tonight we've got Acts 18. Kind of a shorter one, but again, I don't want to go through 2 chapters at a time. Next chapter 19 is a little bit longer. So we'll see. I don't know. There's some fun stuff going on in here. So unfortunately for people online, I don't have slides, so you just got to listen to me read. Darn. So any questions from before where we're at? We're meandering through Paul's second missionary journey. That's all you need to know. That's enough.
I already asked about the tent.
Well, actually, we get it tonight, so there you go. If you just wait a week, you're so impatient. So Acts 18, verses 1 through 4. After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth, and he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome. And he went to see them, and because he was of the same trade, he stayed with them and worked, for they were tent makers by trade. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade Jews and Greeks. So, he goes to Corinth. Corinth is known for a few things. It is known for being the capital of the province of Greece, so very big that way. It was a very big commercial center, so a lot of commerce, and it was known for its sexual immorality. It was kind of like the Las Vegas red light district, Amsterdam, kind of all rolled into one. It was just sexual immorality. The sexual stuff that was Corinth. If what happens in Corinth stays in Corinth, and even spills out a little bit after, and it's just this interesting place. Which is why, why Paul's 2 letters to the Corinthians are the longer ones, and we're a lot of what are you people doing? And having to correct, if you recall, one of the big things that he was dealing with was a guy in a congregation who had taken his father's wife, so his either stepmother or whatever, and it was so bad that Paul had encouraged them to kick him out of the congregation to give him over to the devil, so that maybe by that he will see the error of his ways and seek repentance. So yeah, it's and that was the church, so that was inside the church. So you can imagine how
The rest of it was.
how society was when they were whatever. So yeah, it's a fun place. So we were introduced to Priscilla and Aquila, who we'll hear about a little bit more. They had come, so they were Jews who had been cast out of Rome because of Emperor Claudius. So they were Jews. They were probably believing Jews, or maybe they're Jews and they became believers afterwards. But Emperor Claudius, essentially, his biographer in writing about this expelling the Jews, wrote that it was he expelled the Jews due to riots caused by an agitator named Chrestus. Now, a lot of historians make the argument, and they believe that basically this was a misspelling of Christ. Because the biographer, what was his name? Suetonius, didn't understand the finer details of Christ, didn't understand, and really the attitude, and we'll get this actually in the rest of the chapter, the attitude towards this Christian movement that is beginning from the Roman authorities is, I mean, they're looking at it kind of like, think about Pontius Pilate. They're looking at it like this is a Jewish religious thing. Like, this is all dealing with the religion of the Jews. There's some guy who was a Jewish guy, and he made all sorts of religious claims and got everybody worked up. But that's, I mean, they really don't really have to spend a lot of time getting into it. They don't want to spend a lot of time getting into it because it's a Jewish issue. So the thinking is that when he says that there are these riots caused by this Chrestus dude, he's really talking about Christ, which kind of follows because what are we noticing as Paul goes through? Every time he goes to preach in a synagogue, the Jews are following him and getting all, rioty because he's preaching Christ. So everywhere that Christ is being proclaimed, there's trouble because the Jews are upset with the Jewish Christians and Paul and all this stuff. So these conflicts, so basically all the conflicts that we see Paul dealing with is the reason why the Jews are being expelled from Rome at that time. So, I mean, we don't have an exact, this is exactly what was going on, but you put all the dots together, it's like, this is probably what was going on. Then we get into tent making. So, for those of you who are patient enough to wait for this week, Paul, we learned that he was a tent maker by trade, which was a big industry in Tarsus where Paul grew up. And just kind of shows that Paul, as he was doing his missionary thing, he was not only supported, but if he had to work, he would work. He would just kind of ply his trade wherever he went. And while he did this, he was in a synagogue every Sabbath, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. So he's just doing his thing. Any questions about that? It's very straightforward. A lot of the stuff in Acts is just very straightforward because it's like, and Paul went here and he preached. Okay. We get into a little bit more fun stuff now. Acts 18, verses 5 through 11. When Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul was occupied with the word, testifying to the Jews that the Christ was Jesus. And when they opposed and reviled him, he shook out his garments and said to them, "Your blood be on your own heads. I am innocent. From now on I will go to the Gentiles." Love this. And he left there and went to the house of a man named Titius Justus, a worshiper of God. Love this part. His house was next door to the synagogue. Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, believed in the Lord, together with his entire household. And many of the Corinthians, hearing Paul, believed and were baptized. And the Lord said to Paul one night in a vision, "Do not be afraid, but go on speaking and do not be silent. For I am with you, and no one will attack you to harm you, for I have many in this town who are my people." And he stayed 1 year and 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. So, what's that?
I says, that's a bit of time.
That's a bit of time, yes. Yeah. We, like I said before, the Acts jumps around like he went here, but he stayed long time, stretches of time.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah.
Every
Yep.
we've been.
Yeah, Acts is not good with giving you a good idea of how long these things. You get little bits and pieces and like, ooh, wow.
It takes quite a while to walk through this.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Yeah, I mean, some of the places he sailed, but he is journeying by land. But so I love how he's busy preaching. They oppose him, they revile him, and he's so fed up. He says, "Your blood be on your own heads. I'm innocent. I'm going to the Gentiles." And he walks out of the synagogue and goes right next door. Which again, this would be such a great cinematic moment where it's like the it's all dramatic, and Paul is like they're yelling at him like, oh, he's like, oh, blood on your heads, I'm going to the Gentiles. Open the door, open the door. It goes like
That's what I watched before I came here.
What's that?
I watched it.
Yeah.
And literally, you did just like you did.
Well, see, yeah, it's just great stuff.
Doctors.
I'm going home, and you just right next door. I'm leaving you guys to do your own thing next door to me. So you gotta love that. And this is just if ever you have to read this text in for like the readings, it is Titius. Titius. Otherwise, it doesn't sound good at all. Because I've read it like that in the past, and as soon as it exited my lips, I'm like, that's not a good pronunciation. That's just, it doesn't, no. So Titius Justus, he says he's a worshiper of God. So because Paul says I'm going to the Gentiles, likely this is a Gentile convert who, believes in the Jewish God, but is not circumcised. But we're also told Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, believed in the Lord, together with his entire household. So Paul is, he's making these inroads, and people are believing. But you also have the Jews who are reviling him, opposing him. I mean, to a degree where, good Lord, Paul didn't say anything really sideways to the people who wanted to stone him to death. And yet these in Corinth, which, again, Corinth is a pretty nasty place, he's like, I can't stand you people. I've had enough. To which, this is kind of a nice little thing here where, it says, many of the Corinthians hearing Paul believed and were baptized. So he's really having a go, and yet it's succeeding, but he's still like pushed to his limits. And then God comes to him in a vision and says, don't be afraid. Go on speaking, don't be silent. Which seems to indicate that Paul is struggling. Even though he's having successes, I would imagine going every place, and every place you go, there are people who are wanting to kill you and following you around and, all this. That's not great. That's got to be hard. I wouldn't know. I'm beloved wherever I go. So it's, it's the burden of being me. But Paul seems to be struggling. And for a guy who was like very bold to speak of Christ, he's like, go on speaking, don't be silent. Which, like, all right, so if God needs to come to him in a vision and encourage him and tell him like, hey, keep going, keep talking, the vocational stress was likely very strong here. But the cool thing is that he says like, okay, I'm going to protect you. No one will attack you. No one will harm you. To what purpose? Not for Paul's well-being, but for the sake of the people in the city. Because he's like, I still got people. I still need you to talk to people. So, just that whole mission-minded kind of outlook where God is always looking out for those he wants. And so, everything that we do, when he calls us to do things, is for the sake of others. It's for the sake of the people who don't know him. It's always for others. We're always, everything that we do is outwards. Because we don't have to worry about ourselves. The whole point of God's provision is don't worry about tomorrow, what you're going to wear, what you have to eat, your strength or whatever. It's like God will provide. God will give you what you need. You will have what you need. So, and he ends up staying there for 1.5 years. So that was some pretty good encouragement. I probably wouldn't have lasted more than a week. So,
Evidently didn't get stoned again.
yeah, no. Well, hey, God said he was not going to allow anybody to harm him. No, I'm not sure if it's like, if God gave him like for 1.5 years. So you're good for the next 1.5 years, but after that, you're on your own. But yeah, it is nice to have that like, if God comes to you and says, all right, I'm going to protect you, then, well, I would imagine that probably, you know what? I'm projecting. So this is not scriptural. I'm projecting here. See, if it was me, like, this is my second missionary journey. I've been facing opposition. People have been chasing me from town to town. Okay, I get it. It's when they took me out and stoned me and left me for dead. That's like, okay, things just got real. And like, that's the kind of thing that would stick with me. And, and Paul is going to go through a lot worse. So, I mean, there's more coming, which, God preserved him. And probably that was like, if Paul at that moment was like, why did you let this happen, God? And God's like, oh, you have no idea what's coming. Get ready. But I mean, that would stick with you.
Who's the guy who prayed over him and the scales fell off his eyes?
Oh, yes, that guy.
When he was
Blank.
afraid to pray for Paul, the Lord told him and said, I've shown him all he's going to have to suffer for my name. So he knew
Oh,
at some point something fell off.
yeah. Yeah. I definitely, there's that. I would add in there that seeing is a lot different than experiencing, though. Like, seeing, like, I've shown you all that you must suffer, and be like, whoa, yeah, that looks severe. And then, yeah, once the first stone hits, it's like, okay, whoa. So, yeah, again, projecting a little bit. But, I mean, that kind of stuff. So, I think that maybe at this point, I mean, it is wearing heavily. I mean, Paul's just a guy. It's real easy to look at Paul, especially because he's like the super apostle, right? To look at Paul and read all of his things and man, everything he's writing is he's inspired by the word of God. Absolutely. He's writing scripture, yes, it's all great. Okay. Yes, but he's still a sinner. He's still a sinner. Just like, you've got Psalms in the Old Testament where they're prayers. They're either songs or prayers. And some of these prayers, and one of my favorites, is that ends with something to the effect of, and Lord, may you dash my enemies' babies on the rocks, and I might see them burn forever. Something along those lines. Which is like, okay, probably not a good prayer. Like, I wouldn't hold that up in church and see, this is our prayer book, so you can model your prayers after this. I'd be like, okay, right, I'm like, that's an example of the kind of venting that God wants from you. Like, he wants that conversation. Like, he wants you to come to him with everything and just let it fly. I'm going to say that's not God-pleasing. Like, what you're asking him for, he's not going to be like, it's like we can ask for a lot of things that are not necessarily good. So, like...
The prayer that Truman had in his office. Lord, make me right, for thou knowest that I am a stubborn man.
There you go. Yeah. So yeah, like I look at things where Paul he'll say things like, to the circumcision people who are trying to tell you to be circumcised, I wish they would circumcise themselves further or completely. So basically Paul is like, hey, those guys who are telling you need to be circumcised, I wish they would finish the job on themselves. See, now I look to that and I say, that's not a good example for us. Like, I don't think that's an example for us to follow. I think that's an excellent example of Paul being a human being and saying, I am very frustrated with the lies and the false doctrine that they're giving, to the degree that I'm going to express myself in a maybe not great way. So yeah, I don't, it's one of those things where you hold up what Paul says about doctrine. When he speaks, absolutely, this is the word of God. But you also have to take into account these are letters, these are personal letters, and he writes with his own voice. And he might say something that's, did God inspire him to say he wished that the Judaizers would cut off their manhood? I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. Like, that was probably Paul speaking out of frustration. But all that to say, Paul is human. So I think you can see this and say like, he was probably stressed. He was dealing with some stuff, so much so that God had to come to him in a vision to encourage him, to keep him going. And that's, I like that. I like the idea that Paul needs help,
So
because I need help.
Paul has written extensively.
Yes, prolifically.
Was he writing concurrently as he was on his journeys, or did most of his writing?
They're coming. Those are coming later. So, he arrives in Corinth and he's going to set up a church and help develop it. Later on, he's going to write to them. So, some of these are some of his later writings are he's going around, but then most of our prison letters when he's jailed and when he's transferred and all that. So, yeah, this is the first round where he's establishing churches, getting things going, and then so they start off and then they have their first voters meeting and things go askew. They're already arguing about stuff. So yeah. See, now that would be good for the show too. You see Paul going next door. He sets up the church. All right, guys. I taught you well. I'm leaving these guys. You got it. And then he leaves. And then the next scene is like they call a voters meeting and yeah. Yeah. Does it have to be an hour long? Can you preach shorter? Oh, we don't like the wine. I mean, these are real issues. Okay, anyway. Where were we before I got very sidetracked? Acts 12:17. Or Acts 18, 12 through 17, sorry. But when Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, that is Greece, the Jews made a united attack on Paul and brought him before the tribunal, saying, "This man is persuading people to worship God contrary to the law." But when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, "If it were a matter of wrongdoing or vicious crime, O Jews, I would have reason to accept your complaint. But since it is a matter of questions about words and names in your own law, see to it yourselves. I refuse to be a judge of these things." And he drove them from the tribunal. And they all seized Sosthenes, the ruler of the synagogue, and beat him in front of the tribunal. But Gallio paid no attention to any of this. What? Why what?
Why did they grab Sosthenes?
Oh, why not? Oh, everybody knows Sosthenes. He's just asking for it.
Always gangs up on one man.
Well, yeah. It's easier to blame one person. Come on, you target your rage. I mean, you can't be upset with everybody. What were you to do with that? Just find one person. So much more cathartic that way. So at this point, the Jews make this united attack against Paul. And so their whole thing is they come and they're bringing these charges against him, saying he's persuading people to worship God contrary to the law. So to understand why they would bring that to the Roman proconsul is because the Jewish religion, the Jewish people, their religion had legal standing in the Roman Empire. Because of their particularity and the way Rome had decided to kind of appease, well, not really appease them, but kind of lay down the law for them and say, like, look, we're going to, we're occupying you. But hey, we're benevolent occupiers, so we're going to allow you to continue worshiping your own way. You can do your own little thing to a degree. Pay us taxes, but whatever. So the Jewish religion had legal standing in the Roman Empire. They were permitted to worship God according to their own laws. They were not required to participate in the Roman religious rituals and rites and whatnot. So the accusation that they're bringing is saying, like, look, this guy Paul is presenting a new religion that has no standing in Roman law. Because they're saying, like, there's Roman law over their religion, there's Jewish law over theirs, but this is something completely new. So he's violating our religious law and your religious law. So they're kind of doing a redo of Pilate or what the Jews were doing with Jesus by saying, like, first they brought to Pilate and said, look, he's blaspheming. And Pilate's like, I don't care. That's your deal. And then they turn around and say, oh, he claims to be a king. Caesar wouldn't like that. So Pilate's like, oh, you guys. So they're trying to do something like that with Paul. Just as Paul's going to defend himself, I love it. Gallio is like, I have no time for you guys. This is ridiculous. Because and he dismisses it out of hand because he's like, look, this is your issue. And I mean, he says basically the same thing Pilate said to the Sanhedrin. Said, this is a matter of your law. You deal with it. Take him, judge him according to your law. Of course, the problem with the Sanhedrin was the issue was they had no law that could condemn him to death or to crucify him. So, he's Gallio is just like, I don't care. And he's like, you're talking about words and names. Because again, he's thinking like the rest of Rome was like, oh, this little Jesus Christ thing, this is just Jewish nonsense. This is Jewish stuff. This is your own little religion. You guys can't keep your stuff straight. You deal with it. So he's just like, yeah, get out of here. Get out of here. Now, poor Sosthenes. Poor Sosthenes. It's not clear who seized him, whether it's the Jews or the Greeks, because it could go either way. The Jews might have taken their own, essentially, and beat him outside the tribunal because he didn't present a good enough case. Because and the idea would be like, well, he's probably the one leading the charge in the court. Whether he's fully committed to it, that's neither here nor there. But he didn't. His case was weak, so the Jews are upset that they're being tossed out of court, so they take it out on Sosthenes. Possible. It could be the Greeks who had been kind of gathered around, the onlookers, kind of the crowds who are like, hey, what's going on? Because there is a lot of anti-Jewish sentiment, given that Claudius the emperor himself has, ordered all the Jews out of Rome because they are troublemakers, because they cause riots. And so now all the Greeks in the area are looking at these troublemaking Jews who seem to be rioting in a way or causing trouble with this Paul guy. So it could be the Greeks who see Sosthenes, this ruler of synagogue, and be like, he's the one in charge, get him. And either way, it's not great. Sosthenes gets the brunt of it all. The fun thing is in 1 Corinthians 1, verse 1, Paul refers to Sosthenes. He said in the very opening, he says, Paul, called by the will of God to be an apostle of Christ Jesus, and our brother Sosthenes. And this is 1 Corinthians. So he's writing to the Corinthian church about our brother Sosthenes, and Sosthenes was not a common name. It was not like, how everybody and their brother was named, Mary or James or, whatever back then. Sosthenes was not common. So it is very likely that Sosthenes either was becoming a believer or after this became a believer. We don't have we don't have any background detail, but it's very likely it's the same guy. So
If the Jews beat him, he must have been a believer, right? It doesn't really say why.
Either. Well, I could see a case where if he was leading a charge, and he's like, yeah, come on, let's get him, guys, and then they lost, and then my own people turned against me. That would make me rather sympathetic to Paul. I'd be like, maybe this Paul guy's got something going. I might have backed the wrong horse here.
So in Corinthians, Paul makes up for it when
Possibly, yeah.
acknowledging.
Yeah, and Paul would have, his thing was to go to the synagogues. So, he probably had interactions with Paul. So, yeah, Sosthenes at some point, clearly he's a believer.
Paul was saying, thanks for taking the beating.
Right, yeah. It's like, don't worry, I'm going to get mine soon enough. But yeah, so it's kind of, it's just interesting that people, well, you look at kind of general American Christianity and kind of, you got a lot of superstar pastors and ministry leaders out there, and like really wealthy and private planes and whatnot. It's like, but then you look at like, well, who are the superstars of the early church? The dude who got beaten, dragged out and beaten and left for dead, and now he's like, hey, he's our brother now. Yeah, I think generally speaking, American Christianity might be missing some points. That's another Bible study. Yeah, and so they beat. I love how they beat him in front of the tribunal, but Gallio paid no attention to any of it. He's just like, you know what? Not my problem. It's like, wow.
It's kind of like being in New York City. You kind of walk by all mugging.
Yeah. Yep. Or it's a great metaphor for just how ineffective government is. Oh, there's somebody being beaten literally on our front doorsteps. What can I do? There's all this red tape. My hands are tied. Yeah. So whichever way you want to go with that. Any questions or thoughts about Gallio or poor Sosthenes? Alrighty, then moving ahead. Verses 18 through 23. After this, Paul stayed many days longer, and then took leave of the brothers and set sail for Syria, and with him Priscilla and Aquila. At, I forgot even how to pronounce it. At Centria? I don't know. He had cut his hair, for he was under a vow. And they came to Ephesus, and he left them there. But he himself went into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. When they asked him to stay for a longer period, he declined. But on taking leave of them, he said, I will return to you if God wills. And he set sail from Ephesus. When he had landed at Caesarea, he went up and greeted the church, and then went down to Antioch. After spending some time there, he departed and went from one place to the next through the region of Galatia and Phrygia, strengthening all the disciples. So, a few things. He takes Priscilla and Aquila, who he met at Corinth, takes them with him. Fun thing is Luke is going to mention them quite often throughout, or several more times in Priscilla. There we go. Throughout Acts. And he always refers to them as Priscilla and Aquila, with her name first. Now, Greek is a very fun language in that usually the first thing that's mentioned either in a list or in a pair or whatever, or in a sentence even, the first thing is the more important thing, or the most important thing. So it's actually very important then that he says Priscilla first, indicating that in the assistance of Paul's ministry, Priscilla played a greater role than her husband. So, again, there is a lot, even taking last week's epistle reading into consideration too. There is so much about this early church that is very countercultural and changing a lot of just the perceptions and the ways of doing things. And this is a great example of like elevating the role of women in the church, and in gospel ministry. So we definitely don't want to diminish that or lose sight of it. So he cut his hair, for he was under a vow. Okay. What's that? Okay. Well, we can get into it. My mom has a comment here. It says that Sosthenes was ruler of the temple. Yes, correct. Did I say otherwise? Ruler of the synagogue. Yeah, okay. If you want a detailed description, and I printed it all out, or I was going to print it all out, and I realized just how long it was. If you go to Numbers chapter 6, the first 20 verses, so verses 1 through 20, and it's Numbers, so they're long verses, details in very great detail the vows of a Nazirite. So basically, you could take these Nazirite vows, and they had all these restrictions. So basically, it was a vow that you would take, and it was not like specific, like it was only a particular type of vow. Like we have no idea what this vow was that he had made. It could have been many things. But the idea was taking a Nazirite vow means you wouldn't cut your hair, you couldn't drink wine or strong drink. In fact, you couldn't even, I don't think you could eat grapes or anything having to do with grapes. So no alcohol whatsoever can touch your lips. You had to grow your hair out. Razor couldn't touch your head until the vow was fulfilled. And there's this whole thing where in fulfillment of the vow, basically you go back to the temple. There's you would offer a certain amount of peace offerings and set, like, 2 doves and a lamb, and there's a prescription for like the things that you have to offer for sacrifice. You would either already, or you at that point cut off your hair. You bring it to the temple. That would be part of the burning sacrifice, which burning hair is just a lovely smell. This is why they have the incense going, right? So this was all part of it. I was going to read it all to you, but it was like, you go to Numbers chapter 6 and you can read all about it. So, like I said, we don't know what the vow was, but it's just kind of pointing out that, Paul was still observing a lot of Jewish customs because he was Jewish. I mean, he grew up that way. He's not doing this like because he feels like he has to. It's not like Paul is going against like salvation by Christ alone. He holds to that 100%. But I mean, he still has, he's living out his faith by keeping some of the law, the rules, the rituals, whatever, of the old covenant, which was fine. I mean, they like when Christianity starts to be a thing, it's like they didn't just say no more circumcision at all. I mean, Paul said to Timothy, be circumcised. I mean, he doesn't need to be, but he's like, for the sake of the Jews that you're going to be around, just be circumcised. So all of this stuff is free. If you want to be circumcised, knock yourself out. If you don't, cool. You want to keep the dietary laws. You don't want to eat shellfish or bacon. Cool. You don't have to. I mean, it has nothing to do with your salvation. And it's coming at it like it doesn't ingratiate you more to God. It doesn't make him happier. So like if you pick, 2 of the Old Testament rules that you want to follow, okay. I mean, I would wonder why. But I mean, if your thought was like, you know what? Because me doing this just makes me feel better. Like I feel like, you know what? That's what God said for the people back then, and for whatever reason, this is how I want to express my faith. I understand that it doesn't get me closer to God, that Christ does everything, yada yada. It's like, oh, okay, cool. That's what Paul chose to do. Now, if anybody said that to me, like, oh, I want to do this, I would caution, just that it's very easy to make a jump from like going from I'm doing this just because it makes me feel good to I'm doing this because I'm doing what God told me to do and I'm happy. Is he okay? And it's a slippery slope. It can very easily, when we go kind of off the deep end with our piety, it can kind of go in weird places. And the thing is, if you were telling me like you were going to go kosher, right? You're going to follow the dietary laws. And I was to ask you why. And you said, because it makes me feel like I'm closer to God. I'd say, there's a red flag. That's going to get you into trouble down the road. I don't know for sure. I'm pretty sure. You're going to get to a point where it's going to become a thing. If you said, well, I've got a Jewish friend, dear Jewish friend, who I've been trying to share Christ with. And you know what? I think that if I was to, observe those laws and be able to kind of bring them over and share a meal that I make, that they can eat at my table because they are very observant, I think maybe that will open up a door. Or maybe that's a way that I can kind of get closer to them, that maybe I'll have an opportunity. Then I'd be like, absolutely go for it. Yes, I will buy you some matzah bread. I'll help you. Because your motivation is, I'm doing this for my neighbor, and not I'm doing it for me and my relationship with God. It's just always dicey when it's like, I'm doing this because it makes me feel, it's like, I'm not a big fan of doing things because they make you feel a certain way. Like, I can go home and polish up a sleeve of Oreo cookies because it makes me feel good. The next day it won't. For the next week it won't. But in that moment, it's like, these are great. And then I feel absolutely sick afterwards. I'm a horrible judge of things that make me feel good versus the things that are good for me. Not a good judge of that.
They don't match, do they?
Yeah, not often.
Well,
They can, but and I'm not saying like it's impossible. I mean, a lot of people they can maintain it. God bless them. I struggle. And it's to me, it seems like a dangerous road.
my mind slips over now back to the Jewish
Mm-hmm.
idea of ritualistic or
Right.
but into like monasteries,
Oh, sure.
nunneries, because are they not taking vows of certain ways of doing things because I can't finish that sentence.
Well, through austerity, trying to become closer to God, or
Yeah.
yeah, and the correct term is monkery.
Mercury, okay.
You haven't. I was trying to say monastery a few weeks ago at Sunday school, and I couldn't come up with it. And all I could think of was monkery, because I knew nunnery, but I couldn't think of monastery. So I'm like, it's a monkery, which is a lot more fun. Yeah, because that was Luther's whole take on it. Was he went into the monastery, and the idea was, by restricting yourself, by denying yourself, you were either increasing in holiness or getting closer to that and drawing closer to Christ. And the thing was no matter what he did, it wasn't working.
Yeah.
For him, yeah. Now, yeah, for other people, were they feeling like they were? Very possible, sure. Were they?
Don't we have a Lutheran monastery somewhere?
God, I hope not.
Somewhere.
I don't think we do. If we do, well, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. Do we? I don't know. If we did, would I be surprised? No.
But then,
It's a brewery.
A brewery. We have plenty of Lutheran breweries, yeah. No monasteries, a lot of breweries, yeah.
and Christ gives us an example of denying himself.
Right. But that's always for other people. See, and that's where kind of the monastery concepts sort of falls off, is because you're leaving. The whole concept was you're withdrawing from society in order to draw closer for yourself. And I mean, I suppose you could say, well, you're drawing closer with your brotherhood, the little cloister or whatever. But it still is a drawing away from society.
So when Christ fasted and things like that, he was doing that for other people.
Oh, everything he did, yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, he didn't have to do anything.
As an example for
As an example for us, but definitely, so like when he fasts, the example for fasting for us would be to trust in him, so that we would trust in him. Cool. To be closer. I mean, like that feeling of like I'm doing this in order to, and really to get closer to trust in him is to understand just how much you need. I mean, so fasting really emphasizes how crucial it is and how far away we are. But yeah, for all these things, I mean, Christ doesn't just do things for an example, but for other people, or for everyone. Everything he does is for us. So, there are definitely practices that get our minds focused on him. But even still, it's going to be, that's bad. Here we are. We're kneeling. There we go. Hey. So like we're fasting, right? It's for strengthening of our faith, right? Like recognizing we are, trusting in the Holy Spirit. God will provide, knowing that God will provide. It's all about the arrow coming down. It's when we think like our fasting makes him happy. That's the danger. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to get there, but the brain wasn't going. And see, that's why it's like Is fasting a good thing, a good practice? I'd say yes, it is, as long as you maintain that attitude about it. Once it becomes this, that's when it's like, yep, nope, got to stop.
We do have a Lutheran monastery.
We do?
Yes, and it's right here, very close to
Is it LCMS?
St. Augustine's house.
Really?
Monastery in Oakland County, Michigan.
Oof. Saints?
Monastery and retreat house.
Really?
I don't know, sometimes I go off the rails and run into these things, and I remember that myself.
St. Augustine's house. That doesn't sound like us. We don't have St. Augustine anything. That is bizarre.
Is it Augustus or Augustus?
Augustine.
Let's see. I don't see. That's fascinating. Well, here we go. Ecumenical friendships. This will really tell you if there's any ecumenical friendships with anybody, it's not us. Wow, that was terrible, but sadly true. The circle of friends of the community has included people from many different Protestant denominations, Roman Catholics, and Eastern Orthodox. Definitely not LCMS. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that is not LCMS. I'll look at that more. I mean, I'm not going. But yeah, like any practice that, and that's why I say it's always, these things are always dangerous. And again, not to pursue things, but just having the right attitude. So if it's for more realization of Jesus comes down to us and, getting closer that way of him coming to us, absolutely. If it's to motivate us to go out and to serve others, absolutely. If it's anything like that, that's going to be just danger territory. Because it enforces this, I'm doing this to make God happy. God is happy with what I'm doing. I'm justified because I'm working at it. It's just, it's icky.
So it's, if you
It can be.
don't do it if you think it's going to make you get closer to God. That's already close to you.
Right.
He's already
Sure.
done what needs to be done. It's to make you realize he's already done what he's
Correct.
everything that's needed.
Yeah. If it gets you closer to that, Christ has done everything for me, beautiful. And it's not going to be, it's different for everybody. Some people can fast and remain in that space, and that's perfect. Keep doing it. If you know your weaknesses, then know your weaknesses. I know how sometimes when the frame of mind I get into, where it's like, I'm doing this thing, and I get like that twinge of like, hey, I'm a good Christian, all right, and I catch myself real quick as like, oh, nope, that's bad. So I don't stop because here's the thing, it's like, well, sure, going out, feeding the homeless, I get that little like, ooh, I'm good, so I need to stop feeding the homeless. Like, well, no, it's not that. I need to fix my issue with it. And I catch myself, so that's good.
I think with the fasting, when I've done it before, with the Pentecostal focus or Baptist focus, I feel like I'm getting closer to God. It's probably low blood sugar.
There you go.
Feel weaker. I just feel weaker.
Well, there's that too. It's see now my take on a lot of this stuff is coming from a place of being very moderate. I don't like extremes. I don't know if you've noticed. I don't like it, although I myself am extreme when I'm dealing with it. I'm extreme. I'm like, blow it up. But I'm leery of going to one side or the other, because it's my experience. Bad things happen. So, like when it comes down to Lent, you need to give up something for Lent. It's like, yes, no, I don't care. Not that I don't care, but it's like it's all about your motivation. Like, I need to give up something for Lent. Why? Because that's what we do. That's not a good answer. That's a stupid answer. Like, it's fine. Okay, fine. You value tradition. Cool. Okay. Why do you want to give up something for Lent? Because it helps me focus on trusting in Christ and kind of he sacrificed for me. And so, when I sacrifice, my what I'm giving up, it just makes me think of like, you know what? It reminds me of his sacrifice for me. Cool. Okay. Decent. Go for it. Give up something. Well, I'm going to give up chocolate. Okay. I mean, if you're going to go down that road, I'd say, well, give up something that's going to cause you a little bit of discomfort.
Have Lent during January. That will.
Yeah, well, yeah. Or from Halloween to December, yeah, like through Christmas. Yeah, really give up chocolate then. Then I'll be impressed. So, it's like, okay, if it helps you, sure. If you're doing it just because, that's not a good reason. If you're doing it because, like, well, God wants me to give something up, it's like, well, start with your sin then. Start there. See how well that goes for you. Then maybe, actually, you know what? That would be good because right away you'll be like, oh, I can't. Like, yeah, now you're in Lent. So, okay. This is why I can't preach off the cuff. People would not come back. Yeah, what is wrong with this guy? There's been a movement lately, like instead of giving up something for Lent, you're taking on something for Lent. Well, I mean, it's like, okay, sure. I mean, if it's like volunteering for something, well, I'd say, well, technically, then you're giving up your time, so you're still doing whatever. But it's like, okay, but why? Well, because I want to do good for my neighbor. Okay, cool. I mean, I'd suggest you do it all year round, but start with Lent. Cool. Okay, I'm doing it because, I'm going to make God happier with what I'm. Okay. Yes, you should probably still be doing stuff for people, but let's get your attitude right. You just got to dig deeper and figure out why you're doing these things. What's the motivation? So yeah, and a big thing I've seen a lot of in the last decade or so is, Christian churches, Lutheran churches, whatever, who will observe a Passover Seder meal. Like they will do it exactly as the Jewish ritual. And they'll be like, well, because it connects us with the whole history of the people of Israel, because, the whole story of salvation. And so we're kind of, experiencing what they experience and gives a greater understanding. It's like, okay. But see, that meal, it wasn't just, it was like, hey, remember how God saved us out of Egypt? And it's supposed to remind you like, hey, God's going to bring you out of bondage. So by celebrating it, you're kind of getting away from the whole resurrection thing. Besides the fact that Christ instituted a new meal to supersede that. So, there are certain things where I fall more on like, yeah, just don't do it. Like, I understand why. I just don't think it's a good idea.
It seems like hypocrisy to Jewish people.
Well, that too. Yeah. Yeah, I don't like that either.
Bunch of posers.
So yeah, it's, you can do a lot of things that are fine. So yeah, if you want to grow your hair out for a vow, go for it. See, I made a vow, and so I'm just waiting. I'm still trying to fulfill it. It's like I'm going to get down to 180 someday, and then I'll cut my beard and burn it in front of the church. Yeah, we can do it.
Ahead of time.
Why do you think his hair is sin-create?
I don't know.
Was there, the vows had to be fulfilled at the temple, right?
I think, they had to be that was the cap. I don't know that it was, if I remember from reading Numbers 6, I don't think it necessarily stated like you had to do the cutting at the temple, or, the cutting was like when the vow was fulfilled. So when he got there, I'm assuming that was the fulfillment of his vow. So maybe whatever he made, it was fulfilled there. So he's like, or whatever. So yeah, but yeah, it's nothing big. It's just he was following the custom. Ooh, 4 minutes left. Cool. Final section, verses 24 through 28. Now a Jew named Apollos, cool, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was an eloquent man, competent in the scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit, he spoke and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue, but when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him and explained to him the way of God more accurately. And when he wished to cross to Achaia, the brothers encouraged him and wrote to the disciples to welcome him. When he arrived, he greatly helped those who, through grace, had believed, for he powerfully refuted the Jews in public, showing by the scriptures that the Christ was Jesus. So Apollos, we hear in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, where he's like, some say I follow Christ, some say I follow Paul, some say I follow Apollos. So here's this dude, superstar, coming out of Egypt, Alexandria, second largest city in the Roman Empire, large Jewish population, also a huge center for kind of cultural preservation, Greek literature, art, all this stuff, philosophy. So the idea here is that Apollos was trained in kind of the philosophy of Philo, whatever. Philo was a dude who was a Hellenized Jew who believed, he was Christian, and so, or was he? Yeah, he was. Yeah. Now I'm having second thoughts. Anyway, basically his whole thing was he's taking the Hebrew messianic teachings and Greek philosophy and melding them together, which, in a way, he's trying to bridge the gap between Greek thought and Jewish thought, which is, that's where Alexandria is, where the Septuagint was written. That's the Greek version of the Old Testament, which.
You know what Rachel says about this?
Yeah, everybody spits on the Septuagint because it's not always a great translation. And because, it's written by some Hellenized people who are they're merging some Greek thought with it. So it wasn't. There were benefits to that in terms of being able to better communicate some ideas from Messianic Judaism into Greek thought. So it did provide maybe some hooks to teaching Gentiles, but then you also kind of lose a lot of some of the truth of the scriptures, minor details. Some things kind of got downplayed or changed. So it wasn't a perfect thing. And so what Luke says here is that, okay, so here comes Apollos. He was trained in Alexandria. He was competent in the scriptures. He'd been instructed. So he knew his stuff. He was fervent in spirit. He taught accurately the things of Jesus. So though he was brought up in this kind of bastardized form of this blending, he actually spoke accurately. So he kind of he took that, but he had the right understanding. But he only knew the baptism of John. Yeah.
If he had been taught, he spoke and he taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, there was no written word yet. So he hadn't gotten this by word.
Well, that's why he only knew the baptism of John. So what he's heard, and really, when in the Gospels, the baptism of John is very beginning. So through the churches, the Christians who are kind of making their way, spreading throughout, they're saying a lot of stuff, but he's only picking up bits and pieces. So, and he's putting it together. So he's got he knows that, Christ he's the Lamb of God, because that's what John said, right? So he knows that Jesus is the Lord, but that's all he knows. He doesn't have all the suffering, all the crucifixion, the resurrection necessarily. He's teaching accurately up to a point. So he's got a limited picture. Because he only knows the baptism of John. So he knows that John baptized him. But he doesn't have the full story. Because at this time, Luke is traveling along with them and all that. He's writing the gospel. Mark is writing his gospel. Matthew writing. These gospels are in the works, or depending on the timelines he used, are just barely getting out there. So he just has the Old Testament. And in whatever he's gotten from Christians who are making their way throughout the Roman Empire. So Priscilla and Aquila hear this guy and like, wow, this guy is on fire. But he doesn't quite have everything. So they teach him. They take him privately and they explain everything to him. Like, oh, no, this is, he rose again, blah, blah, blah. And they explain everything out. And he receives it. And then he's like, okay, well, I want to go and do more of this. So they're like, hey, cool, we'll give you a nice little letter. Go and be fruitful. And he goes and he's great at refuting Jews in public, pointing to Christ. So he's good. He goes out there.
But it says showing by the scriptures that the Christ
Right.
Jesus. Where did these scriptures come
Oh, Old Testament, like, pointing to Isaiah, because and where you'd say if he only knew the baptism of John, because we said before, like the suffering servant idea was very repugnant to the Jews, even though it's in Isaiah. But I would say that there's a lot of things in the New Testament that a lot of Christians find repugnant, but that's a whole different discussion. So I mean, you could.
Sunday's second
Oh, I wasn't even going there. So yeah, that they didn't, like, they could read Isaiah and not see it. I mean, that's fine. I mean, that's easy to understand. So as he's like, he doesn't even have the full picture. So when Priscilla and Aquila teach him and show him this stuff, and he's drawing the connection, and he's like, oh, now he sees Isaiah and the connections. He's like, yep, there we go. So now when he goes to refute the Jews, he's using scriptures, the Old Testament, to say like, yes, this is Christ. This is Jesus. And so, yeah.
He was a Jew too. Jew. Apollos.
Was he?
Yeah, it sounds
So
Jew.
right there.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I was looking at native. I'm like, he was a native.
Yeah, I just thought that too.
Third word. I'm tired. Yes. Well, and I was like, I don't think Apollos is. Yeah, anyway. I'm tracking. Sorry. The one thing I would just point out there is that it's a neat picture of somebody who kind of stands up in church and is very bold about proclaiming Christ. Maybe they don't quite have all the right, everything is quite there. A little rough around the edges. Maybe they don't quite have a full understanding of this, that, or the other. But you know what? They're really strong. They didn't squelch it. They didn't oh, be quiet, you don't know what you're talking about, and discourage him. They saw talent, they saw spirit, and they fostered it. And they provided teaching, they helped him along, and then they let him loose. And that's great. Awesome stuff. And which is for us, for our synod, for LCMS Lutherans, the good lesson there is, we're, generally speaking, we can be pretty good about squashing the spirit. I know. In pursuit of that pure, and I'm not saying pure doctrine is bad. Pure doctrine is our goal. We should always want to have pure doctrine, 100%. But we don't always have to squash the spirit to get there. And sometimes we have a tendency to do just that. Like, we see somebody with a little bit of, potential, and it's like, oh, but they're completely, they don't understand, they don't know, or they're coming in from a different church, so they don't know anything. And, and you got to, protect. I think there are probably ways that you can actually foster the spirit and teach people.
Maybe focus a little on the teaching. Like they were knowledgeable from the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, honestly, if we trained pastors to be teachers, that would be good too. If you've noticed, Heather never attends my Bible studies because it drives her crazy. Because I'm not a teacher. Like, I mean, I do this, but I mean, this is all I know how to do is like lecture style, and that works for you guys apparently. I do, I like some back and forth, so, there's that. So we do have, it's more of kind of an open lecture kind of style. But that's my thing, and that's all I know. I'm not a teacher by trade. I don't know how to teach different levels. Like, teaching kids, little kids, oh, I hate that. Thank God for Sunday school teachers. I'm no good at it. I had my pastor's educator class, and I got sent to a little Lutheran school, and I had to do lessons for kindergarten class. My God, I hated it. I defaulted into, let's play some games. And all my reviews are like, okay, so yeah, you did make the connection there to Jesus, but you got to teach them. You can't just play games. And that was like every class, that was my review. But yeah, I'm by no means an exception. Most pastors aren't teachers. We're not taught to teach. We're not taught how to teach. All we know is whatever we do. So all I know is this. Well, and it works. But this style doesn't work for everyone. Like, I think Heather drives her crazy. It's just because she knows what she's doing. She's an actual teacher. She's trained in this. She picks out, like, you did that wrong. You shouldn't have done that. And, like, you should be doing this. Like, oh. Like, yeah, go back to my office. She's happy there. She doesn't want to. But yeah, being a teacher is different. It requires a certain set of skills and temperament.
When my kids were over at Our Savior, this was years ago, and before I was going back to teaching, they asked me to sub over there. And I ended up in kindergarten and it was winter time. And did it click with me that it takes about 20 minutes longer for these kids to get ready to leave? They held up the whole school.
Well, basic stuff like that, right? Yeah.
They were putting snowsuits on. Yeah.
But things like that, yeah. And like with kids, early on my confirmation classes were horrible because I'd think like, oh, well, let's open up with like a little fun activity. Let's, just kind of loosen things up. Well, I had a hard time transitioning from like, okay, we're done having fun and now we're going to learn. I didn't know how to make that transition, so it ended up just like, okay, we're having fun, okay, all right, now sit down. And it was a very abrupt shift and didn't land well. But it was challenging, and or I get an idea and it would just devolve into oh, we had fun. I got in my head like to teach baptism. I brought a water gun and I just squirt them, which was fun for me. Wasn't good for teaching because then it became a whole thing like but yeah, it's good to know how to teach. But there are some pastors who know how to teach and are good, for sure. But it's by no means a given, because you got weirdos who end up at seminary, get crazy people. But yeah, it's about squashing the spirit. That's right. Yeah, we just need to do better about that. And even just like, well, I think, so like what we do here with like the little kids, having them help. So that's huge. And I'm a firm believer of like getting the kids involved, and it when they say, oh, can I do this? It's great that the only times that I say no is when I've already got another kid lined up. And I'll say like, you know what, they're doing it this week, you can do it next week. Because once they got a taste for it, they want to do it. They want to serve. And, some places, kids shouldn't be serving. It's like, I don't know. There's other ways, actually, I couldn't have them serve in the service. But, well, we'll cross that bridge. That's all I had. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Cool. Well, then we'll end it there. Was that 18? So 19 next week. Cool. Thank you. We might be done by Christmas. Which honestly, it's coming up, you know.